Wow, we're in the final episode of season 1 of Doing a Little Better with Simon and Callan, and it went quick. Like, I honestly feel like I could go for another season if the listeners out there do another season. What about you, Simon?
Yeah, no, I think I may have mentioned this before, but this was not something that I was thinking, oh my gosh, I want to do a podcast. Just sort of kicking off into a world where we don't really know where it's going to go and if we're going to be able to validate our hypothesis or not. Not the most comfortable for me, but I've really come to enjoy and especially appreciate the creative way that we can have this conversation and figure things out in real time. I think it's great, and I hope we get the chance to do a little better, to do more.
I heard you say that you enjoyed this, and I just want to recall that a few episodes ago, you were like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm here doing this, but I have to do it. So hearing you say that you enjoy it, that means the most to me. And I'm glad that we could do this together. I'm glad that there'll probably be more, at least some live stuff and some fun stuff now that the true work is done.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I would argue that the true work is just getting started, right? I would argue that we've set the stage for what we're trying to do, and now we're going to spend the next year testing and validating our hypothesis in the real world with outside partners, and we'll continue to have conversations. But there's a really critical part of the conversation that we haven't touched on yet, and that is the origin of the name of this organization, A Little Better Co. So we call this podcast Doing a Little Better. The original intent of the name of this organization was if everybody took the time to consciously make decisions in their lives to do a little better, we could absolutely transform the state of the world. We're in this position because folks are thinking about what is best for me, not what is better for society, for others, whatever the case may be. And we're trying to catalyze folks who have a creative mindset to be able to use their creativity to envision a better world. But now we've got this kind of weird situation. What happens when we don't all agree on what it means to do a little better? What does it mean to do a little better? What does that mean to you, Callan? When you think of doing a little better, what does that mean to you?
Well, today it means something different, which I think that's kind of cool about it, is that it could mean something different every day. But I opened up to my favorite, or one of my favorite books, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I opened up to a page and it said, if your life is just to know that you're here to breathe, and you're here to go through it, and the work is actually just showing up for the work until it isn't, that there would be more peace. So I feel like today it means just breathing. And I feel like that's kind of nice. I'm happy to breathe here in this mic. I'm happy to breathe. So that's what it means to me. What about you?
Yeah, well, you know what? You bring up a good point. It does change. The thing I've been thinking about a lot is, it's something a lot of people have said, but just if you look around the world, around you directly, and if everybody made the decision to pick up one piece of trash, we wouldn't have litter on the street, right? If it's just one tiny little action that everybody makes, and I know this isn't revolutionary, but it's just as simple as we don't have to make major transformations like we talked about with Empath Labs, right? This isn't like we have to make a 10-year jump in progress tomorrow. Everybody just has to say, hey, I'm looking around. Is there something I could be doing to make my community, my world a little better for others, right? So we decided to have this conversation publicly so that we could share our knowledge and our finding, just completely put it out there, hopefully to help others make their world a little better. But we've got a very special guest today here for our 6th episode. And Callan, I'd love for you to introduce who we're talking to.
I am so excited. Welcome to the podcast, Anja, who is the founder of Broccoli Publishing, Broccoli Mag, and just incredible human being that I honestly think of as a hero founder of mine. So no pressure. Anja, welcome to the show. Nice to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you in this new way.
Yeah. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, because I know a lot about you, but maybe Simon doesn't, or maybe he's read up everything about you. Who knows?
Well, as you said, I'm in the publishing business. So I didn't start there until quite late in life. I was 29 when I got my first job at a magazine, and that kind of led me into a real appreciation for that process. I always loved books. I always loved magazines. Never really had a clear picture of how they got made. That it was always kind of an ambiguous thing to me that I never really stopped to think that there were like people doing these creative jobs that actually were required to make the magazine I was holding in my hand. But I loved the form factor. And after working as a photographer, I started my first editorial job as an art director and kind of learned the inner workings. And now it's, 90% of my life is thinking about how to make things turn into beautiful paper objects. And it's so fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, some of my favorites, like, of course, Broccoli Mag, which is an international cannabis magazine for lovers. You see, I still got that down, even though it's been years. But we've got Broccoli Mag, and then you have Catnip magazine, and you've got Snail World. So I'd love for you to talk about the fun of cannabis and all the things that you love.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the first magazine we made was Broccoli, our namesake title, and it came out in 2017 when the world was just, or, at least in America, was just starting to see new legal weed in different states. So Oregon, where I live in Portland, we were the third state to come online. I think that's right. And it was the first place to see people trying to kind of give cannabis a bit of an image makeover of like showing a new style and give it modern branding and creative packaging and things like that. And it was really interesting to see that transformation because it's such a stigmatized plant. Even now, 8 years later, it's still really stigmatized. It's still not federally legal. And when you look outside the US, beyond Canada and a couple, Uruguay, a couple places, it's still illegal in so many places. So the stigma is huge. And one of the big reasons we wanted to make the magazine in the first place was to show that like really normal, cool, smart, interesting people like weed. And it doesn't mean anything else about them except for that's just something they're interested in. So we positioned the plant editorially alongside other arts and culture subjects. So every issue, it would be, 40 to 50, 60% would be about cannabis, obviously, and the people who were involved in the industry and sort of a lot of really cool people getting involved for the first time. And the rest of it was like talking about interesting music or something crazy from science history that we enjoyed, or making up fantasy stories about going to space, like really kind of tying in a playful, sort of psychedelic silliness and smartness alongside weed stories. So it was a really fun way to like kick off our editorial journey. And in the very beginning, I thought that's what Broccoli would be, that I thought we would be, a weed media company forever and ever. And then, of course, over the years, you go with the flow and you evolve with what makes sense and what's exciting. And we ended up making a bunch of different magazines like Catnip. Like you said, it's all about cats, as you can imagine. We do artist book publishing now. We have a whole mushroom fungi magazine as well called Mushroom People. We're working on a music and sound magazine. We have a kind of conceptual magazine in the works too called Sun and Moon, which is about the sun and the moon, very celestial topics. So we're at a place right now where we're chasing a lot of dreams and visions and like bringing that same editorial mindset about expanding the conception around what a theme might look like or what any idea might look like, and broadening the horizons of like how you approach that subject to make it dynamic and fun and interesting. We just love a deep dive.
Man, you answered that so beautifully. I want to just like go back and really like, I don't want to say the word unpack because that sounds too therapy, but I really want to unpack cannabis.
I fully admit I was going to use the word unpack. So
Okay, cool. So as you said, and as we know, cannabis, marijuana, weed, all of the terms that they give this plant is a medicine, and it's helpful to some people and it's not helpful to other people. So I kind of say things as like, it's chef's tool. It's a knife. It's the way that you use it. And I feel like that's really important when we think about like doing a little better. You saw the plant and you were like, okay, this could be a little better. And so working in Portland, I have a question, like, how do you feel that you were able to impact how cannabis looked?
I think it's really special because we've been able to like hear from people about how it impacted their view of things. So Broccoli was really the first magazine and maybe the first piece of media that like presented weed in a really respectful, creative way. And we would get emails from people from all over the world saying that they felt like they saw themselves in the magazine in a way that they had never seen before, or that broccoli was the only place where they felt like safe to explore and be kind of enveloped in this weed world, because wherever they live, or maybe their families or their culture, do not allow any kind of conversation around the plant. So that was really, really special and like surprising, I think, for me, in the sense that, like, you know, I'm like a white lady in Portland. It's not that big of a deal to use weed here. And it wasn't even before legalization. But for people who have different backgrounds, like, I was like, wow, this is having more of an impact than I think I could have even imagined. And to have that role editorially and to like be the steward of that message is like such an honor. And I felt like really lucky to get to bring so many people into the magazine, because obviously it's not just, I'm not the one writing the essays and telling the story. I'm helping them be told. And that was like a really special part of the process. And it's cool because, you know, you see the impact kind of visually and in the design world as well. So much has changed. When we started, I mean, if you can flash your mind back to 2017, like there was no like pretty weed or like cute pipes. They were just starting to exist. And it's really cool because a lot of the people who came up right around that time are still doing it and making really beautiful things. A lot of people have like started and ended businesses within that time too, because of course it's a hard space to work in. But yeah, it's just really interesting to see that shift. And then it's also crazy because, you know, we stopped the magazine with issue 20 last fall. And then like there's still so many people who are still in like, you know, issue 1 of the weed story in another country or another city or even just in a part of their lives in a moment. So it's like kind of a never ending loop that could happen. So even if we have this little, you know, a blip in the bigger timeline of what the cannabis story is, we have our own little special blip. And then like there are going to be future packages and future moments that I'm really excited to see what comes next.
So there were 2 parts of the conversation. I'm going to use the word unpack that I really want to make sure we touch on, which are so critical for this episode and our story arc ourselves. One, which is the idea that cannabis is something that makes the world a little better. And I want to really dig into what that means. And 2 is using creativity to transform its perception. Right? What you did so masterfully and artfully that has been truly transformative is wrapping something with a negative perception in a way to position it as something that feels comfortable and approachable and not something that's taboo or, you know, a negative connotation. So I want to start with the first piece, if that's okay. Going back to what Callan asked, it's 2017. Why is it important to destigmatize cannabis? Why, you know, tell me a little bit about what the thought process is of why this is important to make this thing, you know, more socially acceptable.
Well, I think, you know, it was kind of mentioned already, the fact that cannabis is such a useful tool for people. And the more normalized it is, the easier the access becomes. And then like people's lives can improve. You know, when you have something that's stigmatized, even if, well, actually, I think that I was going to say, even if it's legal, they might still feel shameful about it. And that's true because, you know, it's like the thing where you maybe have someone over and they see maybe a cute pipe on your shelf. They might ask you about it. And it could be kind of an interesting starting point of a conversation. Or honestly, even the safer version was the magazine, because anyone will pick up a magazine. They don't know what it's about. And, you know, our covers are interpretive. They're conceptual. They always had a weedy note to them, but maybe you need to do a second take. But what a great conversation starter in such a safe way, because you're not even seeing like paraphernalia where you're like, ooh, this person is doing drugs. You're like, wow, this person is reading. This is a dangerous place to start. Like, it's a great way to start a conversation. But legalization was a huge part of it, because for some people, the only barrier was that it was illegal. You know, they're not like necessarily worried about what their neighbor or aunt thinks. It's just like, well, I don't do things that are illegal. Or the fear of like, where do I get it from? Who do I trust? Like, am I going to be in a safe environment? Like, being able to just walk into a store and purchase something is a much different, safer experience. And of course, like, when you talk about safety, you're also talking about the way that legal cannabis is regulated. So, you know, it is absolutely wild, the level of detail of testing and, you know, no, you can't have pesticides, you can't have heavy metals. Like it's tested for everything. And state by state, it does sort of change the kind of specificity of what they're looking for. But if you have a contaminated batch, it's not getting on the shelves if you're doing your business properly, which you really have to in the legal markets. And it's crazy because in the earlier days, everything was going through that system. Now I just heard that they're letting THCA products get put into the unregulated market, which I'm a little rusty on my weed facts, but it's basically classified as hemp, but can still get you as high as normal weed once it's ignited and you have that heat source on it. So people are going to be just buying almost regular weed at the gas station, but it's going to be completely untested depending on its source. So the weed safety is on a big journey on a long-term picture that I don't know where it's going to go. But of course, for a lot of people, they never left their illegal original source either. They're like their guy, they never broke up with him. So they still get stuff from their friend. And
Oh, I'm so sorry. Zooming back to the bigger picture, I feel like cannabis is a great example of this transformation that we're seeing in so many different areas, right? Of society who's continuously evolving and understanding that things that maybe we were taught are not good could actually make the world a little better. And I look at, from 2017 to, what is it, 2025? It's weird. Wow. So over the past almost a decade, that same transformation of the perception of alcohol, right? And that shift we're seeing where folks are waking up to alcohol as a poison that is very bad for you. It's carcinogen. And it's wild that has been just completely, open and available. And yet something like cannabis, which any cancer survivor and or someone affected by cancer will tell you, it's one of the most important medicines you can have, is still largely illegal. So you saw an opportunity and said, this is something that could make the world better. And to do that, we're going to use creativity, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that thought process of how do we, and I know we touched on it a little bit, but how do we take this thing that's got that negative stigma, like you said, right? And Callan, you even described like this ugly traditional 6-leaf, like nonsensical marijuana plant. Yeah, right. How did you make it beautiful and use the power of creativity to get folks interested and comfortable?
I'd say we took a really, really simple approach, which was to strip it back to being what it is, which is just a plant. And all plants are beautiful and interesting. So when you look at it in that perspective, and for us, we put it on our first cover in a really gorgeous flower arrangement. We worked with Amy Merrick, who's an incredible floral designer trained in Ikebana, Japanese flower arranging. And she created these amazing arrangements with these hemp plants in such a stunning style that any visually driven person that loves art or design would, or even just flowers would like. So we put it in a familiar setting and we made it really beautiful. And I think we just kind of did that over and over and over again. How can we show this in a way that's beautiful and familiar? And in a way, it was almost really easy for a creative person to like, if I worked at an ad agency and I had to come up with some kind of groundbreaking concept for like, I don't know, gum or a pack of chips, I would be lost. I would not do well at that. But everything was open for weed because it hadn't been done. No one was presenting it in a beautiful way. So we were like, great, all of my creative ideas that might have not felt fresh as they were, suddenly were given this brand new life by seeing it through the lens of cannabis. And the plant and flower thing was a really consistent theme for us throughout all of our issues. We even did an entire book using floral arranging, like photographs that we had done through the shoot. Flowers were they're everywhere. I just love flowers. So it's always going to be there no matter what the project is. But yeah, like just treating it like a plant and understanding the science and making it relatable to people through these like channels of other themes and other subjects. Like, how is cannabis connected to art? How is it connected to sound and music? How is it connected to science and history and entrepreneurship and all these things that are happening around us that we know the stories for the most part. We understand those subjects. And weed is there too if you want it to be and if you're looking in the right places.
What a great answer to that question. Because like I personally, like, Anna, you got me on my road, which is great because I love books. I love flowers. And I forget which issue that I was in. Thank you for featuring me.
I think it was 7.
That was 7. Oh, thanks for remembering. Yeah, it's episode 7, one of my favorite numbers. And 7 was cool because it was a recap of the In Bloom festival that Anja put together. And honestly, what I think is the most beautiful part about the plant and what she and her team were able to create was like the community. The people came in droves. They still talk about that festival. Like I remember people were talking about the podcast and how listening to Lauren Yoshiko and Min Lei just talk was what people needed during the pandemic, and like really missed friendship and people. And I got a tattoo after the festival, and I remember other people saying they got tattoos too. And they shortly after I was able to join the team, which was one of the highlights of my life. And I was a broccolini. And I was like, ooh, I'm a broccolini now. Like all the girlies had their name. It was just so inviting. And Anja brings up a safety measure because it's safe and it's dangerous. Like what we're doing is very politically charged, and there are a lot of people that are still in prison. Like, and it takes 10 years to remove and expunge your record, so you can't even get a job. Like it really impacts, and you know, at the same level in Pennsylvania specifically, we have an all medical use here. And I was on a call the other day, and the revenue, the monthly generated revenue for all the cannabis dispensaries in PA, 150 million a month. 150 million a month comes in, and there are still people in prison and still people that can't get jobs. So on one end, it's a flower and it's so beautiful and it's really important. And on the other end, it's dangerous. It's like dangerous in what legality and criminality at like a higher level. The plant's not dangerous at all. It's just a plant, and you won't die from it. Even though I think there was one case because of the sheer amount of weight of the powder of it, you know, like the cinnamon challenge. Somebody was like asphyxiated off of a powder. So throughout time, and I get so excited about this because like I know 10,000 years ago we were using this plant, and I'm just really grateful to have the information now available. I think what Simon, you were saying before, it has to become available information.
No, but this is why I was so excited about this conversation. You know, we talked with Melissa last time about when you think about creativity, what was the joke she made? It's not just sandals and crystals and like, you know, some spiritual event. There is an incredible bridge that you have created here where, you know, there have been a lot of people writing from a scientific perspective, how many white papers on the safety or efficacy of cannabis, how many social justice or equity or any sort of social progress based research that had been done, you know, a lot of formal and structured approaches to say, hey, this is okay and we should be okay. But it wasn't until you took a creative, community driven approach that things really started to shift. And this is one of the biggest aha moments, at least in the conversation from my perspective, is creativity is that X factor that didn't matter how many scientific papers were out there, how many people argued from the legal perspective or from the social progress perspective. It was putting it in context of art and beauty and community that people started to go, oh, you know what? This is okay. This is a little better. And that's part of what we're hoping folks can realize is sometimes an asymmetric response is the only response that works, right? Not going in the context of how society tells us to make progress, but doing something totally different. So Anja, you're kind of almost like belittling your own accomplishment here by being like, it was easy. We used art. It was pretty, but that in and of itself is a brilliant, new and novel approach to solving this challenge. This is a beautiful example of a highly controversial topic that we all know in our hearts makes the world a little better and is far more effective and better than a lot of other things that are out there. And yet, it wasn't until we put it in a creative and community-driven context that change really started to happen. And you have undoubtedly driven a tremendous amount of progress that I think a lot of people who have written the white papers or other traditional methodologies are probably envious of. And that's what we're hoping to bridge, is for people who are like feeling stuck. How are we in 2025 and this thing is still illegal? Creative solutions will get us there, right? You know, it's a leap, but that's why, you know, we wanted to have this conversation. So I'm going to stop talking now because I would love to pivot to how this then grew beyond just cannabis. You said there's a whole new line, multiple publications, and I'm really hoping you have an example of a snail in a little diorama that you can pull out?
Oh, I could absolutely run and grab well, I don't have a real snail, but I have a diorama. But, yeah, I think, let's see. So 2020, we had been around 3 years, and this is when the snails come into the picture. So we had collaborated with artists Alira Murawski and Sam Copeland, and they make these crazy dioramas that they put their pet snails into, and then they photograph the scenes. So it's like real world, real life human scenes, but shrunk down to snail size. And their work is so novel and fun and playful. And I commissioned them to make some images for the 3rd issue of Broccoli. And then I commissioned them to make a couple little reading room dioramas for that big event that Kaylin mentioned. And the collaboration just grew from there. They had this huge body of work of photos. And, we were like, well, if we can make a magazine, we can probably make a book. They're both basically flat paper objects, and our printer knows how to make them. So I pitched it to the artists to make their own book, and they went for it. And then that was kind of that was when the first crack in the glass appeared of the box that I had thought I existed in. And from there, a year later, Mushroom People came out. So Mushroom People is a magazine all about fungi, about all kinds. And contrary to Broccoli, it is very, very not about drugs, really. There's a very, very small amount of psychedelic, like literally psychedelic mushroom content in there. And it's really looking at the broader world of fungi and how we relate to it and what it all means, because it's a very bizarre, fascinating world. And, as a person who works in, trades and creative ideas, I also get bored pretty easily. And like, I'm always looking over to the left or right of like, what's the other thing I could be working on? And like, what else could we do? So getting to use our incredibly strong editorial and design team brains and apply it to a new subject in the mushroom world was so exciting and fun and necessary, because, you make the same thing, different versions of the same thing over and over again. And like, you need a break. You need to look at something else and to think about something else. And often that adjacent work helps you on the other side as well. Like it all feeds into the same like brain of creative power. So Mushroom People was really fun. And mushrooms were also having a big moment, in the 2019, and they really still are. But that was when we started seeing people writing like, big news and culture pieces about mushrooms. We're like, oh, they're about to have a moment. And now that moment is like still in development.
Yeah, ask a quick question. When you say, so I'm not very well versed in this subject, but when you say mushrooms, do you mean actual mushrooms that you like cook and prepare with food, or are you saying like psychedelics? Like
I'm saying all kinds. So like the ones in the woods that you shouldn't eat because they'll kill you, the ones in the woods that you could eat, or from some guy's basement that would get you high. But we really honestly don't talk about those ones a ton. I think that's the perception that people would have, considering that we made a cannabis magazine. They assume it's a psychedelic mushroom magazine. And while it is a little psychedelic in its visuals and art, I wish I could remember the number, but like, I think fungi outnumber us on the planet, like by a fair amount. And they're one of the weirdest. They're not animals. They're not plants. They're like their own category, right? So they're very strange. And the mycelium's crazy. Like,
can I just explain real quick what the mycelium is? Because I get excited. The mycelium is the interconnected network of mushroom that connect the trees so that they can communicate with each other. So when one tree starts to go down, it sends network to everybody else through the mycelium, through the mushroom, to like get resources. So yeah, I geek out about mushrooms too.
That theory is actually being contested. There's people they're like, we're not sure if it's exactly that direct, but no matter what, they're connected to a lot of things, and they're crazy, freaky, and interesting. So it was a really, really fun world to play in editorially. But yeah, we've also made, actually the Mushroom magazine inspired us to make our first Oracle deck, because there was so much that we learned from mushrooms that we're like, oh, it's so easy to apply these ideas to our human world, and that idea of community and interconnectedness and like poison and what is good for you, what is bad for you. The interpretations of mushrooms are very broad, so it like suited that type of format really well. So we've made a bunch of different Oracle decks inspired by nature, and we've done other artist book publishing as well. So working with single artists to make their books come to life in a way that I think is really different than a lot of other publishing out there, because we're not trying to sell them in, Barnes and Noble and big stores where the person on the marketing team at the publisher is like, well, what are people getting out of this book? Where's the like guided journal at the end? Where's the task or the to-do? There isn't one. It's art. It's art for art's sake. You can interpret it how you will. And usually that's what the artist wants as well. It's like they want their art to speak for them. They don't want to give someone a job to do along with it. Maybe some people do. I don't know. But we've had a really nice opportunity to let artists like express their work in this form factor that is fairly inaccessible in the way that they would like it to see it exist in the world. So the art publishing part of our business, I'm really excited and proud of, and I hope that it'll keep growing as well. And yeah, then we're making all these other magazines too. Cat magazine, super easy to explain because it's just 200 pages all about cats and cat culture and appreciating cats and history and just all the silly, dumb stuff they do. Very popular, as you can imagine. And then, yeah, we're also doing a music and sound magazine called Heartbeat. So kind of trying to twist the idea of what a music magazine is and go beyond just talking about artists and the music they make, but looking in a lot in nature of the sounds that we hear out in the world from animals and whales and birds, and understanding more about how hearing works and what sound is, and tons of personal memory. Emotion is a big part of the editorial backbone for Heartbeat. So we've had people share some really interesting personal stories and music memories. We're looking a lot to the past as well, trying to uncover some hidden gems. There's a little playlist on every page. I think that no matter who you are and no matter how much of a music nerd you are, like there will be someone you've never heard of in here. So I'm excited about that because I think it kind of breaks what most formats are for music magazines. Like they're very genre based, and well, we've got whales in ours, so there.
And that's so cool. And as Simon was saying, our last podcast was all about music, and specifically with Melissa from, was it American
Composers Orchestra? Yeah.
American Composers Orchestra. And she really validated like what we wanted this whole podcast to be about, which is that, creativity is an accelerant. And it's really cool when you think about music and sound as like the original, like some of the original notes that made this world. So she was talking about like ancient magic and things. It was really interesting because then she was matching that with data and metrics, and so it was really cool. So I'm really looking forward to what's coming next.
Callan, you just mentioned there is something really interesting. Melissa, who came from a very data-driven and strategic, approach, still had that same connection of there's something ancient, there's something emotional, there's something human that we're trying to bring together. And it's almost like the pendulum of society went from, we believe in each other and community and emotions and nature and the power of all of these things. Then society swung all the way over here. And it was like, well, if it's not from a pharmaceutical company, it's not legitimate, right? And we're kind of seeing that pendulum swing back, and we're in this really interesting place where there are so many conversations that I have no doubt some folks listening to this are going to be like, what the hell are they talking about, right? But the whole, the crux of what we're trying to get at is the first step to solving any problem, as they always say, the first step to making the world a little better is making that conversation comfortable and approachable and enjoyable. And that's what you've done, right? You've taken these topics that maybe are taboo, like we talk about mushrooms, which again, admittedly, like I didn't even know the context of what you were talking about, but in a good way, right? In a good way, this is saying this may seem silly, but we're going to make it comfortable. We're going to make it approachable. We're going to use art to make this something you want to share. And I think that is something that I really want to focus on here in this conversation is the power of creativity to, expose the meaning of something or expose new ideas. And even the theory that creative leadership is an act of care, right? And I just would love to get your sense on, I know, we talk about Cat Magazine. It's silly. We're talking about cats. We talk about mushrooms. We talk about snails. We talk about cannabis. But tell me a little bit about the importance of using creativity to get these topics out there. It's not just about fun, right?
No, absolutely not. And I think you were really close to our whole kind of core value as an editorial team, which I think could be described as like a beginner's mind. Like the way that we're sending the stories out into the world, they need to be able to be understood by someone who's either approaching the subject for the very first time or is a diehard true believer in whatever that thing is, and all the people in between. Because you never know where someone is going to encounter the thing you've made. Could be in a store, they could see it on a website, they could see it on their friend's coffee table, and they should be able to pick it up, open to any story, and feel welcomed in and like the information is accessible. And that doesn't mean that it's not smart and that's not interesting, but it doesn't have to be basic to be beginner friendly or accessible. And I think people sometimes don't necessarily understand that there's this like beautiful middle ground of being smart and accessible, And that was super important with the cannabis publication in the beginning because it was so stigmatized. And a lot of the things that existed out there, like we were talking about earlier, were really, really hardcore, either, medical journals, science publications, industry publications, nothing for the person just coming out from the other side of like, I'm just a normal person and I'm kind of interested. So we always are checking each other and checking the writers and like commenting in the Google Docs, like this needs more, or like, I don't think this makes sense like it is. We need a little bit of explaining. And that happens all the time for all of these years. We are always going to be looking for those moments where just expand on this a little bit, just explain what this is. Because our readers are also from all over the world, you can't use normal like regional cultural, oh, well, you would know what this is, like you wouldn't reference a certain type of business and expect someone to know what goes on in that place because maybe they live in Croatia and they do not have salt and straw ice cream or whatever, right? Like you can't make these super hyper specific references without kind of like being like, oh, by the way, it's this. So, we really try to make it interesting and smart and easy to understand. And I think that can be true also from a design perspective too, because when we first started talking about broccoli, we're like, let's make it so weird. Like we'll have the text running over the other text and it'll be like, oh, I feel so stoned. Like we wanted to take it to this hilarious place of like, what would the trippiest magazine in the world look like? And it was during those conversations pre-production with people who were telling me like, they're really like heartfelt stories about like how important cannabis was to them for XYZ reasons, changed their lives for XYZ reasons. And I realized like, oh, it would be so disrespectful to all these people to put out something so up its own ass and disrespectfully like conceptual to the point of being disrespectful to the reader. I was like, we actually need to make sure you can read it. You have to be able to read every article and it needs to feel friendly. And that's just sort of my aesthetic approach, no matter what. Like I love things that are walk the line between being beautiful and weird, but I'm never looking to make someone feel really uncomfortable by what they see or freak them out. Or like, we often get a lot of like kind of body horror-esque art submissions for no matter what the subject prompt is. There's always stuff that feels like a little grotesque because that's their style. I'm like, that's your artistic vision. Great. It's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for like a dreamland where things sometimes you're like, that's a little off, but I think I like it, It's not the nightmare that you're hoping to wake up from quickly. But, art is so crazy. So when you go down the visual path, it can go in a lot of different directions. But I like things to feel friendly, too. So when I'm commissioning art or looking for artists, it is that like visual translation of those same ideas. Beautiful, accessible, makes you feel good, makes you feel like, you're welcomed in. Because I think it sucks when you pick something up and you're like, I guess I don't get it. And then you walk away. That's not what we're trying to do.
Callan is trying to also create a movement where artists can be elevated to become activists and help tell stories and help connect these dots. And so many people are trying to do that. And I'd love to know from your perspective of someone who has and continues to do that, what do today's cultural creators, for lack of a better term, need more of? Whether from their audiences, from partners, from funders, from society, what do they need to be able to do their most meaningful work?
I think it's the two most basic things, which are time and money, and they're connected, right? Like we've been doing some consulting with other hopeful magazine makers, and that's kind of what a lot of it comes down to. How much time do you have to give to something? And do you have any money to make it happen? If you're making something that's tangible, like a book or a magazine, you have to rely on services that cost money to make them. And another thing we've talked a lot about, like my other editors and I, we've always paid people from the very beginning, and, you know, the rates have gotten a little better over time, but it was always that was always crucial. You know, if we're going to ask you to do work for us and hopefully try to make money off of it in the long run, we wanted to be creating an environment where they're getting something out of it as well. We all know exposure doesn't pay the bills, and the like creation of a really small network, relatively speaking, what we're doing is still so small in the grand scheme of the not sheer volume of talented writers and artists that are out there looking for work. You know, we're doing a little part of that, creating a little bit of that infrastructure where people are getting paid for the things they're doing. But I think, you know, we were talking to someone today where she's trying to start a magazine, doesn't know how much she can spend on it, doesn't really know who the reader is. And we're like, there are ways that you can kind of experiment for free, just putting things out online, trying to organize some events. Like, the resources sometimes are there to sort of try things out before you take the big dive. But it is like sad but true that almost everything costs money. And I mean, even like all the news that we're seeing from the grant funding being cut this year, like that's really scary for people who rely on it. And a lot of people in the publishing industry rely on grants to make their magazines, to make their books, universities, things like that. Like, I'm seeing what we would consider maybe successful in our space magazines posting on Instagram, like, we don't know how we're going to pay the $12,000 that we already spent or already agreed to spend for our contributors because our funding just got cut. So it's interesting because then you look towards people who are maybe relying on like subscription models and things like that. And I might be going kind of off piste here with the publishing revenue schemes, but you need time and money, but you need people, I think, in the end, right? Like, even if you want to do picnics in your backyard where you get together and you talk about something that's important to you, everyone brings something, it's low cost, whatever. Like, if people aren't showing up to read your magazine, to come to your event, to come to your party, if you're not creating something special that gives to them as much as they give to you, then you've got nothing. The only reason Broccoli succeeded in the beginning was because of the number of people that we put in our magazine, paid to be in the magazine, paid to get work from, invited to events, like uplifted on good old Instagram when it was still useful for all of us. Like,
gave magazines too. You gave magazines to a few of my events, free mags. You were just like, here.
I've always felt from the beginning how much giving is required to even expect to receive any amount of support. And then it's this beautiful feedback loop, right? You give, you get, you give, you get, you create this thing together. And then you see the little offshoots, like Kaylin was describing earlier, where it's like people who met at this thing suddenly working on a project together, supporting each other. It's like this crazy like network. It's like a brain map of like little connections firing all around you. And that's, I think, the most powerful thing.
You're using that network, you're using that brain map, you're using all of these resources to instigate change, right? To make the world a little better. And sorry to keep coming back to this, but like 10 years later, you're still at it, almost 10 years later. And I'd love to understand, how do you measure success? And Callan, I'm going to ask you how you're doing, but I didn't want to lose this thread. How do you, at this point, how do you measure success? Because again, we think about who might be listening to this, and you have something on one end of, we are trying to destigmatize these things that currently might be stigmatized, bring them into the public light, make them more comfortable conversations. And on the other end, we've got like, we make little dioramas and put snails in them, and I don't understand the ROI of what you're doing kind of situation. How do you bridge the two? How do you define what you're doing as successful? How do you measure success?
Well, for me, it's maybe twofold. There's like the business side. Like, my business has grown to a point where it's, for a long time, it's been my full-time job, and I'm able to like live the kind of life I want to live and do the kind of work I want to do. And in the same realm, I'm enabling the people that I work with to do the same thing. Like, the team has been the same the whole time, same editorial, same design team. We all really enjoy doing it. And I think it's really lucky to actually enjoy your work. And I'm like, I don't know what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this. I truly have no idea. And I think about it sometimes and it freaks me out. And then I'm like, back to my spreadsheets. Let's make this happen.
I love that.
Yeah. So that's really like, I'm building a life that I enjoy. And that's like really lucky to get to do that. And then on the other side.
I'm so sorry. I just want to pull that one nugget. What if success is just defined as being able to pursue your passions and enabling others to do the same? As simple as that. It's not about how many yachts. How many yachts do you own, by the way?
How many yachts?
Yeah.
I do have a giant cat painting. Does that count?
Yes. Yes, it does.
I'm so sorry. Go on to your next point.
Well, no, the other point was basically just what you said, but it's beyond the team, the Broccoli team, and then the connections with like the artists that we work with and the writers that we work with. You know, we're like commissioning full length, well, for us, full length, 5,000 words, full length books from writers that we've collaborated with. Or like Bethany Van Rijswijk is an artist that we work with who lives all the way over in Tasmania. We've certainly never met. We've never even been on a Google call or a Zoom call. And she does incredible collage work and she's a wonderful writer. We've had her do so many articles, so many pieces of art. She does all the art for our Oracle decks. Like she's basically like almost our most full-time team member unofficially because of the sheer number of collaborations that we're doing together. And like, I never knew that would ever happen, or it's just so special because I'm such a fan of her work. So to like enable this random woman out there across the world to like make her art on such a consistent and continual basis feels really cool and special to me. And then when I see things out in the world that we've made, I'm like, wow, it's in this random store that I just went into in San Francisco, and like seeing it in other countries and people just having it on their couch or whatever. Like, I don't know, just seeing it appear in unexpected places is really exciting and validating and fun because it's like, oh, wow, it's real. And it made it all the way over here somehow. I mean, I know how because I did it, but it's really cool the way things have expanded and like will, I hope, continue to expand.
I was so grateful to be on your team, honestly, during that time. It just inspired me so much and it inspired me to keep going. And like I'd met different people through it and it was just so fun. But I wanted to go back to, I had a couple questions because Bryce and I, my husband, talk about the piece of, what did you say her name was from?
Yeah, Bethany.
Bethany. We wanted to know if Bethany, because it looks like she's painting all of these, because I was like, this has to go on our wall. We keep it next to our bed. Like, and we're like, oh, this is so gorgeous. So, wow, collage. I'll tell Bryce about that. But honestly, you know, to just go back, it is the team. It's the people. It's the writers. It's the artists. It's the people. And it's not really new and novel. It's very ancient. And I love the ancient practice of being able to like say, this is a good life. You know, it's a good life and we all have our privileges and we all want our material things. I want 4 houses, Simon, and I'm grateful that I get 4 houses and I want a shared yacht. So when I think about, you know, what we do for the people and what we give and what we receive, I just think that the work that we're doing is about giving. So I appreciate each of you, even if I'm just going to wrap up our podcast because we're over time, I feel. So I think this would be a great moment and we can fan, you know, girl, boy, all the things about Anja later. And I'm just really appreciative of the time that, Anja, you spent with us, that you let us get inside your cat world. And and thank you for being one of those founders that has truly like given in spider web ways. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, this is such a fun full circle thing because you didn't mention this earlier, but the reason we met was because you emailed me to volunteer at that event to fly out, to give your time for a thing that you were interested in. And like the way it has spiraled out into this like beautiful relationship over the years is so cool. So like, thank you for writing that email because, you know, here we are.
Yeah. I saw your work and I was like, I cannot think of another person I'd want to support. So thanks for creating and appreciate you.
I just want to echo again, thank you so much for coming on this because I feel like you're a real world example of what it means to use the power of creativity to make the world a little better, right? So we started with this theory that creativity is a powerful accelerant for progress. You used creativity to destigmatize a substance, which is incredibly beneficial to us as humans. Now, we're not 100% there, and it's not 100% on your shoulders, right, to change public policy. But we have seen a huge We've seen a huge transformation, and that wasn't done through the traditional means and methodologies of society. That wasn't white papers. That wasn't public policy, rewriting laws. That was saying, hey, let's put this in context of a conversation that's enjoyable, comfortable, and feels like something you want to share. Let's surround it with art. Let's make it beautiful. And therein sparked a community, a transformation. And we think there are a lot of different areas that could benefit from that approach. So keep doing what you're doing, and we're so grateful to have you on this conversation. I don't know how this happened, but that was 6 episodes, season 1. Here we are. What do you think?
I mean, I'm still just like fangirling over Anja because honestly, you said that she destigmatized the plant, but really what she did was she destigmatized the people. And I think that's something that the businesses of now can learn from is like, how do we work on our people skills again and remember what it's like to just come together, however you are, whatever you want to do. And I appreciate, because I feel like this podcast was that for us. It's like a coming together and something that we didn't even talk about on the podcast, but we laughed about it afterwards one time was that one of my theme songs is the more you get together, the more we get together, the happier we'll be. And Simon was like, do you know the Rafi song? And I was just like, that's my theme song. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you for asking me to do this podcast. I'm already looking towards more because we said we were going to prove something and I feel like we did. So check.
No, I'm so glad you brought that anecdote up. So, if you're not familiar, if you don't have small children or don't remember Raffi, but one of the Raffi songs is "The more we get together, the happier we'll be," which has kind of become a big life lesson. As crazy as it sounds, is in this time where we are more isolated than ever, where there's more hate and division, and sorry to take this to a negative place after such a great conversation, but so much uncertainty in the future. What we're finding is the most powerful thing we can do is work together, build communities outside the structures of the very controlled social media platforms, as Anja mentioned, are not so helpful anymore. Beyond the realms of places where you're basically just seeing paid advertisements, sponsored content, and AI-generated content, but real human connections to figure out what the future could look like, to envision that future together using creativity and make a pathway to get there, right? Hopefully we can help accelerate people to feel empowered to envision that future, to define that future, and then to use the tools to make it a reality, right? How much better could the world be if everybody took that time to say, you know what? I think there's a better way to do this. Let's not just keep doing things the way that they were, because it's not working. And I think we have so much more to talk about, so much more to explore. And I'm personally fascinated to see the response to this. This episode won't come out for a couple months, I don't think. There's so many other topics. What else should we talk about? What else would you like to learn, listener? Right? I've got a ton of ideas, but I would love to hear from the community, right?
Yeah. I would love to hear from the community too. I'm also thinking that like brands, businesses, like bring your questions. Like this could be as easy as a question answer. If you have a Q&A, if you want us to come talk to your cohort, if you want to work with us because you want Simon and I's brain on something that you're doing and you just need some extra support. Like Simon, I feel like we'll kind of just be there for them, right?
I have to take a moment to say we've got an incredible team working on this. I know that it's the Simon and Callan show, but we've got, I want to take a moment to say Shira, who's been producing this, Allie, who is our director of operations, who, by the way, wrote, composed, and recorded our opening theme song, Doing a Little Better, and is available for live performances as needed. And our incredible team at Seven Wonders, who is taking these very long-form conversations and making them make sense. But the biggest thing for us is just echoing what you're saying, Callan, is this is the start of an ongoing conversation. We made the conscious decision a couple months ago to do this publicly, and we're not going to stop, right? So now we're going to move on to other forums, other avenues, other channels to help empower you. If you're thinking, you know what, I've got an idea, or I'm feeling stuck, we can help you get unstuck. And I know this might actually feel a little uncomfortable for folks who are in the sort of the larger for-profit business area. Like we just got off of a conversation talking about Broccoli Magazine and destigmatizing cannabis using art, right? Let's say you're a multi-billion-dollar global pharmaceutical organization. You might go, oh, that's not for us. The theory and the approach applies to everybody because we're all humans and we all speak the same emotional, empathetic-led languages. And so I think it's really important, while we've had fun on this conversation, there is a lot of structure and discipline to the way we do things. And we're really excited to meet more of you and start to help see that transformation accelerate together.
Exactly. Yeah, just to echo Simon, like who are your customers? People. It's not dogs, it's not cats, it's the people. So when you think about it, every single thing, it's snails. It's actually snails. When you think about it as a business organization, whether you're a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate or a single individual, like it's all going to come down to your audience. So let's talk.
Well, and speaking of our audience, I think, when I fantasize about what the next season could look like, I think it would be so cool to get to hear from our audience about what they're doing to make the world a little better, whether it's teeny little movements or huge major transformations to inspire others and see what's possible and maybe create networks that don't currently exist. So let us know.
So if you're wondering what to do next, as I'm sure you are, we made it very simple for you. Just join us. Join our community wherever you are. If you're on Instagram, we're there. If you're in this podcast and you want to comment on this podcast, comment, download the worksheets, work together, but join us because we're going to have a continuous newsletter. This is a community. As Simon said, I think we just enlisted in a movement together, so we're not going anywhere and I'm a part of it. And I'm just excited to see you all there. And however we can be of help to you, this is a giving and receiving, and we're excited for it. So with that, is that our last episode?
I think that was it. I think we did it.